Hey guys, Luke here for another episode of Friday Arvo FAQs. So this week we're going to talk about the 5 steps to getting a perfect protein bread loaf. Cool, so tip number 1 for you guys is make sure that the oven is properly preheated. If it's not at temperature yet and you put the loaf of protein bread in, it's not going to rise as much. The baking powder in the loaf of protein bread needs the heat in order for it to rise. So if you're only given it 5-10 minutes for the oven to heat up, it's not going to be long enough. You can't overdo it, so go for 15 or 20 minutes and make sure it's at the right temperature first before you put the loaf of protein bread in. Okay, step number 2 for you guys is don't over mix the protein bread mix once you've added the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. The reason for that is that the baking powder in the mix, once you add the water, it starts to generate air bubbles, which helps it get nice and light and fluffy. If you over mix it with a whisk and whisk the hell out of it, or you use electric beaters, you basically release all that air, which means once it's baked, it doesn't actually rise up as much. So just use a hand whisk or a fork. If there's a few tiny lumps in the mixture, it doesn't actually matter. They'll just come out during the baking process. So don't use electric mixers. Step number 3 is make sure you choose the right size loaf tin. For both our protein bread mix original and 6 Australian seeds, we recommend using a small loaf tin like this one, so 20 centimetres by 9 centimetres. The small loaf tin helps it rise up and you'll get a nice tall loaf of protein bread. If your tin is wider, the protein bread loaf obviously is going to be wider as well, but it won't be as tall, so make sure to get the right size tin. Okay, step number 4 is slicing. We often get asked, how do I slice the loaf of protein bread so it holds together? And the trick is to cool it down beforehand. So once you've baked the loaf, pop it onto a cooling rack to get it down to room temperature. And then you want to wrap it in a tea towel and then pop it into the fridge. That will help cool it completely down. After a couple of hours, pull it out. Use a sharp serrated bread knife, not a flat cooking knife. And then you can slice it up, it'll hold together well and you'll get nice, perfect slices. Step number 5 is storage. So once you've baked and sliced your loaf of protein bread, you want to put it into a Tupperware container and put a clean tea towel over the top. Pop it into the fridge and it'll last like that for about 5 days. If you're not going to eat it all within the 5 days, you can freeze it as well. So what I usually do is get some sandwich bags and portion it out into 2 or 4 slices, pop it into the freezer, and then you can just put it back into the fridge to thaw overnight. It'll last in the freezer for about 3 months, so you've got plenty of time if you're not a huge bread eater. Okay, so that was the 5 steps to getting the perfect loaf of protein bread. Make sure to tune in to next week's episode of Friday Arvo FAQs. And if you guys have any questions for me about our products, nutrition, ingredients or anything, make sure to comment below and we'll try and answer them on a future episode. Cheers.